Hello.
Hey, good evening, everybody. As you can tell, we got a full house tonight. Um, so we're going to talk with Rob and got cohorts with me with NotJay and Ryszard. Before we get started, I do want to say a big thank you to Ryszard. He has been taking a number of the entries of games and putting on Tabletop Simulator, all by his lonesome. So, dude, that is so awesome. I appreciate that.
Don't worry, dear gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I won't be able to do them all.
Well, I did. I will say this, and I'm not, crying about it, but I didn't see mine. Jeez.
and and
Mine's
Eric,
on
for
there.
example, yeah.
His is there. Yours is there. I think Rob is there. One of these things is not like the other.
Yeah, well,
Anyway.
when you got a cool idea.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're gonna start off. We're gonna talk with Rob. He has created SplinterCard, which is one of the games in the Jam. He's also well versed in marketing, so we're going to talk about marketing in general, but also how it pertains to some of the games that we're working on, some ideas, and I'm going to show you some examples of additional content that he created for his game that kind of falls, I think, under that marketing aspect. And it's very crafty, and it's very much in line with the way creative people think. So welcome to the show, Rob.
Hi. Yeah, good to be here.
Nice. Now, you want to tell people where you're from, give us a little bit of background about yourself, what you do, and then kind of what attracted you to the Game Jam.
Yeah, so you can probably tell by how I sound, I'm not from around there. I'm in New Zealand. I'm in a small farming town here. I'm about 20 minutes away from Hobbiton, the set. So that might give you some context.
Okay.
And yeah, I used to play 40K and those kinds of things. And I just got sick of it. Basically, the rules started to annoy me. And so over the last decade, I have been thinking about it without realizing there's a whole community of other kind of war games out there, which just didn't realize. And so I spent about a year working on something of my own. And then I thought, hey, I should probably do some research, right? And figure out, oh, surely these are not new ideas. Someone else must have done this. So I jumped online and had a bit of a dig around, and I ran into Undaunted by David Thompson, which has a similar mechanic in some ways. And then I was thinking, hey, this is a really cool looking game. Looked up David Thompson, and Battlecard came up, which was his entry to the Jam. And then I spent a while trying to figure out how to download that because I found it on Board Game Geek and there's no obvious link that I could see there. So I was digging around, Googling and getting really frustrated, and then finally found the Jam on itch and thought, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. And then saw that it hadn't closed yet, and there was still a month or two left. So yeah, I figured, hey, I can do this. And you know how you have those, I was in the shower and you just have the idea and it just, there it is. It's the only time. A lot of people these days, it seems to be the main way you come up with ideas. So there it was, and I threw it together and stuck it up, and now I got carried away. It's the first game I've ever finished, although it's never going to be finished, right? But seven upload versions later, here we are.
Nice.
And a whole lot of extra stuff. So yeah, and so I should mention I'm a marketing manager in my day job. That's what I do. So I kind of, and I used to work in 3D animation for children's television. So there's kind of a lot of different things coming together, which is why I end up doing what I'm doing. So I'm very good at making my games pretty. I'm very good at posting on Instagram. I'm very good at all that stuff. Whether I'm actually any good at designing games is a whole other thing. And I'm just getting started. So.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, your game is very beautiful. I love the color combinations. And then you've got how many different versions? You've got a printer friendly, you've got a camo version, you have a pink and blue version. I think there's a fourth one. Am I missing one?
No, that's it.
Okay.
And then there's the papercraft.
Yeah, so there's an envelope that you can papercraft to put all the components in. And there's also paper crafting of one of the tanks. In fact, let me share that real quick just to show you guys kind of the extent that we all go
I got
to.
carried away.
It's what we do, right? Oh, hold on. I got to figure out how to share this screen. Let me go back. Nope. There we go. I'm still learning this stuff, guys. Oh, present. Hold on 1 second. Sorry for the delay. There we go. Okay. So there she is. Let me zoom up a little bit on that. So what was it that kind of drove you to these extremes?
Right, I'll show you if I can figure it out. But basically, when I was working on the bigger game that I was researching when I found the jam, the idea was that it was a papercraft war game. So I wanted it to be cheaper than 40K or any of that stuff, but I still wanted a sci-fi game. So I thought, hey, why don't I make the whole thing papercraft? I didn't know print and play was a thing. I never heard of it. And so I thought I was being all original and cool and stuff. But no, turns out it's a thing. But doing it this way, where the models, tabletop models, are themselves papercraft printouts. I haven't really seen much of that around. And this is just the first draft, what you're looking at. But so I used Blender to do some concept art, because I have worked as a concept artist, and then made a 3D model, and then used Blender to unwrap it into a format that works for papercraft. And they bit of Photoshop and some painting, and there you go. So I'll show you the 3D model of that in a moment.
Yeah, let me go ahead and get this off the screen here. That's very impressive, though. I'm not going to lie. I saw that and I was like, man, that's so cool. And I have, when I started getting back into miniature gaming a number of years ago, I found a gentleman who did a lot of terrain that was all papercraft. And I can't find a lot of that stuff these days. Somewhere on some drive somewhere it probably exists. But so I have a soft spot in my heart for papercraft of miniatures like that. But if you want to bring up, I think you have a 3D model you wanted to show?
Yeah, let's see if I can get this working. First time in StreamYard, so the screen. So is that visible? I shared my screen. Is that coming through? There we go.
All right. Now.
So
look at that.
Again, I spent too long on this. There it is.
And this is Tabletop Simulator, correct? Yeah.
I'll just show you I managed to get the tank in there. It's
that is so cool. Yeah, I'm going to be building that one up.
Yeah, it's fun. So, and I guess there's a whole world and a whole lot of lore and a huge thing I've built around this, which I don't know if I should spend ages talking about it, but I'll give you the
real question is, are you going to put up multiple versions of camo and paint schemes for that? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, probably. Honestly, it's just what I do. It just happens. Next thing I know, I've done all this work that is not directly relevant to what I should be doing. You know how it is.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, but that's very cool. I'm definitely going to build one of those.
Cool.
Yeah.
So Ryszard has actually done a really good video already of a playthrough of this, and Ryszard, it looks like you got the rules down. Ryszard, it was good to see. I think part of one of the real challenges of making postcard size games like this is getting the rules to fit on the page. And I figured I had about 600 words, and it took, this is why I'm up to 7 different versions of it, because I keep on realizing that it's completely broken, or something doesn't make sense, so I go through and change it all. And so it's good to see that it actually kind of does make sense. And so the game, I'll just do a real quick, I won't do do a full playthrough, but I'll just kind of show you basically how it works.
Perfect. I mean, take as much time as you want. One of the reasons we do this podcast is to highlight games from the jam. So don't feel like you're rushed at all, sir. Tell us everything, your thought process. The more you share, the more that all of us can learn from what you're doing. So it really does help the community. So don't feel rushed.
All right. No, thank you. If you've played games on maybe even on mobile, such as Clash, I think it's Clash Royale, this is my attempt, strangely, to turn that into a physical game. The basic idea being playing cards as they come up and having a couple of lanes on screen and a couple of different ways to win, basically. And so my focus here was meaningful decisions for the players and a couple of different ways to win, and otherwise just trying to make it a little bit of fun. And it's very simple. So each unit has a card that is associated with it. So if I click here, you can see this one has that symbol in the top left shows that it's an aircraft, and then that corresponds to this one here. And so all that happens is the players roll off to see who starts. These two dice here represent the health of your city, which is basically your when you get to 0, you're dead. You know.
Okay.
And so when playing solo, because there's some solo rules in there, you start the other one on a much higher value than your own because it is a little bit easy. Makes it harder if you do it this way. And then each player takes turns playing a card at a time. So and you play whatever card you want. If I play the card that is this one, I'll just stick it in the played pile. And that means I can move this guy. And I can put him either up on the right, up on the left. And that's that turn done. And then the other player might do the same with their card. So I pull one out, see what it is. Since I'm playing solo, that would be the plane. And the plane can only go on the valley side. So in the lore, there is up on the height here is no air and about 3 Gs of gravity. So on the bottom, you've got an atmosphere and normal gravity. And this is, I'm a sci-fi geek. This does make sense. And the reason it makes sense, I don't know if any of you are interested in sci-fi much, but on a hollow planet, on the outside of the planet, you'll experience the full gravity relevant to the mass of the planet, right? But as you dig down, it gets lower and lower. And when you hit the inside of the shell, gravity drops to 0. And then your 0 G all inside, because it exactly cancels itself out in all directions. So I'm playing with that for my world. You can have high gravity up high, low gravity down low, massive cave systems, and then an area inside the planet about 100 times the volume of Earth, which is atmospheric 0 G, which will be a lot of fun when I get around to that bit. But
I'm having a hard time believing that all of this came to you in the shower.
No, this is a couple
I'm just
of
going to
years.
say, because otherwise I'm shameful in my thought processes.
Yeah. This game came to me in the shower, but no, all the rest of it did not. Don't worry about that. Maybe different showers. But
Fair point. Fair point.
I can tell you that some of the biggest breakthroughs I've had with Ocean Thunder were in the shower.
It's funny, isn't it?
Naval game.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, Erich has joined us as well. Erich, Shy Guy.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So, and then basically all that happens is you move your guys up one at a time. And when you run out of cards, that's the end of the round and we reset. But say, for example, we're doing combat and this one's going to be attacking this guy. So you take the attack value, which in this case is 2, versus the defense value of the opponent, which is 6. You roll. You know what? Come on, roll. And that got a 2. So 2 attack plus 2 makes 4. 4 does not beat the defense rating of the opponent, which is 6. Therefore, nothing happens in this case.
Okay.
And then if it had beat him, then that one goes back over here. He's dead. You would also flip it just to let you know that he can't be used again till the next round. and on the following round, that player could bring it out again. And that's essentially the mechanics of the game. There's not a huge amount more to tell other than, well, actually, no, I tell a lie. There is a quite essential part of it. There are two ways to win. Number one is to get your units into their city. And each time you do that, you would immediately drop their city's value by 1. But if you do that, of course, you are not able to attack any units that are in their city. Right? So you have a choice there. Or if I'm moving some people up this side and I land here by the relic, if my unit survives a round and at the end of the round is alive there next to the relic, then I get one of these. This is a nuke. And then when I want to, if I want to play a command card, which is this one of the options I can play when I do take my turn and play that command card is to use the nuke. And the nuke immediately does an amount of damage to the enemy city equal to the value on the doom trap. After each round, this one moves up. And so by the end of the game, you can wipe them out in one hit.
Oh, nice.
So the stakes go up every round until by the end, they might be on 4, you might be on 4, and it comes down to who has the nuke and who uses it first, basically. Of course, if you don't have a nuke, then the command card also has the option to repair the city by 1 value. So I would say if I'm using it, I might put that up to 3. So as a solo game, it's kind of fun. I don't know. It's fairly predictable. The solo rules randomize which direction the AI sends its units, and also randomize whether it uses aircraft to defend its city. Because one of the rules is that if I have an aircraft in my city, and when they use a nuke, it does 1 less damage to my city.
Can the aircraft fly where there's the heavy gravity or no?
No. Yeah, so the aircraft is this side only.
Okay.
The only unit with that restriction. A couple of the other units, for example, one of the infantry units does 2 damage to a city instead of 1. And one of the other infantry unit has a little bit easier time killing tanks. So
Okay.
I'm just trying to mix it up and have a little bit of paper, scissors, rock thing going on there with counters to various strategies. And so you can either attack their city with your units directly normally by going up the valley side, which is faster, and you'll see there's only 2 spaces I have to get through on that side, versus the other side there's 3. So if I'm going that way, I'm normally going to be trying to do it with nukes. You can only have 1 nuke at a time.
Okay.
And that's more or less it. If the game goes past those 4 rounds, then it's game over, and the winner is whoever has the most health left on their city. Otherwise, it's a tie if you're both the same. Against AI, like I say, it's a bit random. Against a real player, when I play tested it that way, it does get reasonably tense towards the end, which I like. I like that ramping up of tension and kind of stress and stuff. So
Wow. The first thing that hits me, sorry to interrupt you, but the first thing that hits me are just the sheer number of player decisions that you've been able to fit into a relatively small space. And when you look at if you just looked at the map, you're going to think, oh, I've got 2 options. This doesn't look all that complicated, and what kind of choices do I have? But with your explanation, it's pretty amazing how much you've packed in to what appears to be on the outside a really simple game. And I think that's kind of making things simple is hard. And you've got this pretty cool system here with multiple decision points.
And that was my thinking. Thanks. And yeah, it's all about decision points. Decision points and trying to have something a little bit tense and with a little bit of realism, but obviously we're super limited by the format, right? And also, really, I'll be honest, I just wanted to make it pretty. So there you go.
No, it's very cool. It's very cool. Hold on.
It's also a valid reason to make something pretty.
Iggy Crystal, I don't know what to call you. It's called SplinterCard, and there'll be a link somewhere, I'm sure.
It's called SplinterCard. Let me real quickly go put a link. You guys can talk real quick if you don't mind, and I'll go grab a link and put it into chat.
Yeah, so there's the physical version is available. There's a tabletop simulator version which Ryszard has made, which maybe Ryszard, you can share the link. Mine, because my Steam account is too new, I can't share the link yet. I think I've got a week left before I'm allowed to share it. So
I will ask maybe Hisi can send the link. Right now, being in the StreamYard, it's difficult for me to put anything into comments on YouTube.
I put a link to the game. Did you want me to put a link to your video?
Rob mentioned the tabletop simulator module link. If you can put it in, it looks different because I wasn't using, for example, forgive me, my specialized language snapping functions, for example.
Is it in Discord, the link?
Yeah. The one for the tabletop module that I have posted yesterday.
and yours is actually a more recent version than mine anyway, so that's probably better.
So this is why we do not have we haven't seen reverse sides of the counters.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that was a recent thing. I found that in real life, when playing, people were losing track of which units they'd played or were dead this round. And so maybe the last round someone died and came back to life, but now you're getting confused. Wait a minute, I can't remember. Have I played this one yet? I've got the card. Does that mean I can redeploy? And there was just a little bit of confusion. So I wanted to add, that's one of the things, we're going to talk about playtesting later, I suppose. That's one of the things that came through from playtesting with me. It was this kind of constantly new things coming up. Like, for example, putting the matching symbols on the token versus the card, that was a thing that came up from playtesting that was hard to read. Something that's come up from playtesting. This font I'm using for the text on the tokens is actually really difficult to read the numbers, and if I were doing it again, I would change that. It's hard to read the high side, valley side thing here in the middle. There's so much going on the map that people get sometimes sort of, I don't know, just found it hard to all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Was the font that you used for the cards and the unit ratings your own, or did you use some available?
Something free on some website. Free for all use, not just, I made sure it was a properly freeware font. And I'm not having to pay any royalties to, not that I'm commercial, obviously, this is basically personal use, but yeah.
Very cool.
And that's it, really. You guys know the whole game now. So.
It doesn't need to be more. I like I said, I'm very impressed. It's very professional looking. It just amazes me the quality of games that you designers that have submitted to the game jam. I don't think I've seen one yet that I've kind of went, Every single one has been very, very cool, top-notch stuff. So
I want to use the opportunity and ask some questions about this design.
go right ahead.
Those questions will belong to the why category. So I want to say it's not an exam. There are no, hidden hooks or tricky. Those are not really tricky questions. But I want, when I interact with other designers, the biggest thing is they do not necessarily think like me. So one thing that I like to make the opportunity of is to understand the way how you made decisions regarding this game, how about the rules and how things work. So question like this: why two paths on the left and right? Why not 3 or 4?
Yeah, good question. So the unit values, for example, A3, D6, all of these different ones. That mostly I just was like, just see what stuck. And it's similar on the map. But it is theme driven a little bit. I wanted to experiment with the having a primary decision, right? One basic decision the player is making, and that would be it. Do I go valley side or do I go high side? And am I pushing valley, pushing high, or am I going to try and mix it up? And then the game length is tuned so that if you try to push valley side, you can only just do it. And if you try to push high side, you can only just do it. And so I thought about having 3. I thought about allowing units to move across. I suppose it was more just about simplicity. That's all really. I thought one major decision there is enough, and I'll move on to working on other stuff. That's all I can say there.
Don't worry, this is fine. I will just note, just like Hisi mentioned about the simplicity at the beginning, thanks to the presentation technique that we are doing tonight, the other viewers can see the map, and they can see that this map is actually, well, the hillside is not equal to the valley side. You have 3 areas to go through to reach the enemy city, and 2 areas on the valley side. So because units can move only once per card, or I would say per round, then well, it has practical impact on the game.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little bit about why it is the way it is. So the game I was working on before this was a full, with the models, with a proper tabletop war game where you measure your distances, the way, like Warhammer. However, it still had the card-driven mechanic in the sense that you play a card and then the card makes the unit do the thing it's going to do, whatever that is. And this is why you can understand I came across Undaunted when I was doing my research. And well, of course, in that one, there was more going on. For example, you'll have terrain that has an impact on how easy you are to hit. There was distances change depending how hard it is to move through areas. There were no, I don't know what you call them, like the sectors that you're moving through in this map sectors. It's obviously not hex encounter, but it is check encounter.
Zones, areas, that's all fine.
Or point to point is another term that's used for something like this because there are actually points on the map, but yeah.
Right. And that's something that I've learned since finding the jam. For example, I've never heard of GMT games, and all of their games seem to use a point-to-point type system, and they're probably more operational, I guess, in scale. It's not so much tactical skirmish; it's more kind of, I don't know. I'm sure they do all kinds of different stuff, but they seem to lean that way more.
Rob, where's your mic? You're fading in and out a little bit as you're talking.
I'll move forward toward the microphone and see if that helps. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a little better.
I'll just.
That's okay. I got a big head, so you can get right up on the camera. It's still going to be smaller than mine.
No, I have a very small head.
I got the head. Mine's too big. Sorry.
And that's why I'm shy.
No shame.
Yeah.
None. Zero.
I didn't even shave today. I got up and started work, and then next thing I know, the end of the day, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm a bum today. But
Rob, what I really enjoyed about your game is something that you said before, that you look forward to in games, I believe. You said something along those lines. The game is so short at 4 rounds that, until you get there, a lot of things happen very quickly, and I really enjoy that. I enjoy it to the point where, the game's over now. But I really wish I could have played another couple of rounds, which, to me, is the icing on the cake of any game that you ever play in your entire life. Is that feeling of, I really like that, but it's over now.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I had thought about adding another couple of Doom track levels 5 and 6. So by level 6, you're an instant kill no matter what. That would be kind of fun.
Oh, both sides lose?
No, just whoever plays their nuke, that's it. It's over.
Oh, okay.
But you see, it provokes replayability, right? Because it's done, it's finished. I won't. Hey, you know what? Let's play best of 3 now. Let's play best of 5 now, because it's so quick. And you know, after you get the game, which, by the way,
so Eric, are you going to be running a tournament anytime soon?
We should. I had fun. We should. All all the game jam designers against each other.
I will say that I did talk with Rob about getting 3D models of the various units that I could print up at a 6 mil or 15 mil scale, so that we can have miniatures for his game. So no promises, but peer pressure, guys, peer pressure. So he creates them.
Right now in Tabletop Simulator, you can create standees, 2-dimensional standees using the artwork from the cards.
Oh, nice.
Oh, so I want to have
go.
a little miniature of that and paint it up. I so want to do that.
Yeah, I need to. I think I said before the podcast started, I need to work on making that stick. So that is designed to be a papercraft printout that you fold. So obviously there's no depth to the 3D model. So if you were to try and print it, it probably wouldn't work very well. But I love the idea of having it for real. Yeah, it's just cool.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, like I said, just a little peer pressure. But if you do it, I will print some out and ship them to you. And then I'll obviously print some for myself. But yeah,
I'm not going to copyright that one. So.
Well, even if you do, I can use them for my own self, right? So why don't you, before we leave the game here, next year's Game Jam, we're going to have a postcard size and a Christmas card size. So I would have no objection whatsoever if you were to take this game and make it fit on even twice the real estate. Just planting a seed in the brain there, boss.
Sure. Yeah, right. We'll see how I go. But I've got an arrangement with you done already for a different game. We're doing a what was it? I promised, didn't I?
Yeah.
World War I Christmas truce football.
I love. I love that idea.
Very nice.
I don't know if that counts as a war game, but it's a game set during a war, so I guess we'll take it, right?
Yeah, but keep in mind, you're talking with Ryszard, who has knocked out a couple of games, and Erich. So you're in company with guys that have already got 2 kills towards their ace status in the jam. I didn't tell him that, but we'll have to make a special patch or badge or something once somebody submits 5 games.
Not to mention that when it comes to whether my submissions are actually war games, this is another story.
No, they're all good. But I would love to hear some of your thoughts on marketing. I will say you kind of put me to shame a little bit, because you will pop in and promote things, and I'm like, oh man, I should have thought to do that. I should have thought to do that. So, but apparently that is kind of your gig. So if you don't mind expanding on kind of marketing in general, and share some ideas or tips potentially for some of us that don't have that skill set to maybe get our games a little more noticed.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that, as with war game design, I'm good at making them pretty and doing the marketing, but the war game itself is very much this was difficult to get at this far, so it's something I'm new to. And marketing is similar in the sense that my marketing background is B2B, as in business to business marketing for tech companies, but also at the moment I'm working in the non-profit intellectual disability space. So it's very different, but the principles are fundamentally the same. And the thing I've noticed with this game that I've learned from a marketing perspective is that this is really niche. Like we're niches within niches here, or niche. I don't know. Do you say niche or niche?
I say niche, but niche.
Okay.
Potato.
Yeah. Yeah, we say tomato here, so that's
Just another reason why you're wrong, but okay.
Oh, you don't like potatoes? Oh, anyway.
I love potatoes, yes.
We don't say potato. It is potato.
Oh, okay, before you go, I do want to ask one real quick question, and I'll let you pontificate. Chili, with beans or without?
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
so
Be careful.
if you say the word chili here, you're talking about beans. You're not talking about anything cooked. You're just talking about the chili itself.
Oh, the chili bean.
Yeah, as in the chili pod or whatever.
The pepper.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want to talk about chili as in the prepared dish, which is meat with maybe beans or not beans, and the spices and all that, that would be generally referred to as, well, nothing. If it's with nachos, you would call that nacho meat.
Wow.
Because
Okay,
of the
that
word for it. It's
derailed
just meat.
very quickly.
Love it.
So if you're having nachos and you're pouring that on top, then that would be nacho meat or nacho sauce.
Nacho, good idea.
Simple.
No, but what it is fundamentally the same. We have what you would call chili all the time, but it's just it's just language, huh? Like
Yeah.
Fortnite.
Well, people fight over their chili with and without beans in this country.
Right.
So that was why
I'm
I
probably
asked.
a bean guy. I think I'm probably beans. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, you can continue then.
Yet another reason why you're wrong.
I love me some nacho. Good stuff. Okay, I need to stop thinking about food and start thinking about marketing. So,
Hey, Charles.
generally, with marketing, if I were to put a process for all the marketing I do in my job and everything else, it's like first research the market, know who you're marketing to. So one thing that's weird about this little wargame jam is when I'm designing the game, I'm thinking, am I designing this for me and people like me? Or am I designing it for some other group? And so a lot of people who are designing war games and board games, for example, Games Workshop, I'd say one of their primary markets is 12-year-old boys, right? Mostly boys.
Hey, Mike.
But the people designing the games are not 12-year-olds. So there's a whole kind of a disconnect there. You have to make that decision. Am I designing this game for myself or am I designing it for another group I'm thinking about? So once you know that, then you need to go find out all about them. And with this particular subgenre, there's another problem. Designers are a different group of people from consumers. And so when I go on Twitter with you guys or here on this podcast or whatever else, it's typically I'm talking to people who like designing war games, right? And that's not my target market. So if I'm doing marketing, you are not the people I'm making money from. Basically.
That's
No, you're
right.
not.
We are sorry.
Yeah.
Designers are dirt poor.
Yeah. So, I mean, so David Thompson likes my game. I don't know if he does or not. He hasn't said anything. But so what? It's kind of almost irrelevant. If I'm targeting, say, a 12-year-old girl demographic, then obviously it doesn't matter that much if David Thompson likes my game or not. So what? And that ties into playtesting as well. You've got to find out who's best. So I think as designers, what we typically do if we're making war games, because this is just a hobby for us mainly, not all of us, but most of us, we're typically designing games that we want to play. So the kind of person who we would be marketing to would be someone like us. Games Workshop, it's not that so much anymore. And then you look at all kind of other companies like Hasbro. Obviously, I don't know how many of the people who work at Hasbro like playing with Barbie dolls, but I suspect it's not the majority of their stuff, right? So there's that question pops up. And when I was doing this game, I was thinking, well, is this for me or is this for some hypothetical 16-year-old version of me? And I think it's probably for that, actually. And so I can spend all the money I want on Twitter, or I can do marketing on here on this podcast, and that's not. Let's say, for example, I was making this as a commercial game. That's not really who I want. On the other hand, I've posted the link to my game and actually to this podcast. So I don't know how many people are watching who saw that, but I found a number of groups online of print and play Facebook groups or solitaire wargame groups, that kind of thing. I saw Andrea Spagria, I don't know how to pronounce the name,
Right.
saw one of those, and I think was involved in the jam as well. And that's a group. So every time I posted that link in one of those groups, I suddenly saw a massive spike in the number of downloads on my itch page, which was interesting. Whereas when I posted the link on Twitter or on any of the places where designers are, you all weren't interested. That was interesting too. So thanks. And then on Instagram, the vast majority of people who follow my account on Instagram for Vijilant Games, they're just following me to try and get me to follow them. And so they're not actually interested in the, and so there's this whole dynamic of how do you actually reach the people you want to reach. So for you guys making games, if you ever wanted to take one of them commercial, what's the best way to do that? So there's the Dietz, is it Dietz Foundation?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So they're pushing stuff to schools, and that might be a good fit for us, and that might be a good go-to-market. So yeah, I just found it really interesting. I think when we're as niche as this is, then spending money on Google ads and Facebook ads and Instagram ads and TikTok ads and doing a little dance on TikTok to try and get, I don't think that's going to be that effective. Whereas if you find those Facebook groups who are already a really tight, already qualified market, right? The people who you know will be interested in what you're doing. That's where the hits come from. And for me, that's definitely where the hits have come from. Plenty. And then, so that's kind of the main thing that occurred to me was just that, where do you go and how do you do it? I found that interesting. Those are my main thoughts regarding marketing as far as this is concerned. And I guess for you, Hizzycat, you've sort of got your own thing going on there as well in terms of your market is possibly more people like us. I don't know. What do you...
Yeah, well, I've got a number of different things that I'm trying to do that are hobby based, like you said. But I've got, and I'll talk to you about it at some point. And I think it might have I know it has a much larger market because the hobby board gaming market is much larger than the wargaming board market. And I've got that Bigfoot game, which I've had a number of
really nice, by the way. I love it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's just garbage art that I slapped together. It could really use a makeover. But I've had a number of publishers that have play tested it, and I haven't pitched it to them because I didn't want to come in and say, hey, I'm pitching you this game. It's more of I want to get some feedback from them. And if they like it, then they might be interested in publishing it. They'd let me know. Because obviously, anytime you're playing a game with a publisher, there's always that chance, right? So I didn't need to state the obvious. But at some point, I'd like to get your thoughts on how I might market something like that, because Bigfoot is pretty global as a topic, right? And the board game market is much healthier than what we do here in the war game thing. And not to get too far off the topic, but I would love to see what your thoughts are and how that might be some, because I'm trying to decide if I want to do a Kickstarter or a game fund, and or I think it's called Game Found or Game Fund, and I'm leaning in that direction over Game Found. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. I'm leaning in that direction, and this has got a few years. I've mentioned this before, a few years of development, and I think it's just a matter of making some very minor tweaks that I just haven't put in the latest version, and then printing up a bunch of playtest copies just to make sure everything is solid before I try to really start marketing it. And like I said, I'll reach out to you and we can talk what your rates are and things like that. Yeah, I don't want to sidetrack this podcast on that, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that.
I guess the thing that comes to mind, like I said, I'm not super experienced with marketing in this particular type of area. However, I've listened to a few podcasts about board game marketing. There's a few of them around. And the big thing that comes through that makes sense to me is that a Kickstarter itself is not. It's almost the last step in the process. You know what I mean? So they seem to suggest that this will be true of anyone making a game. You almost need to build the community first, which is kind of annoying because how do we do that? You know, so hence posting in those Facebook groups and finding the right people and going to them and trying to build the community that way, which you're doing. You know, with this community seems to be growing quite well, and so you do that, and then once you reach, I don't know what the critical mass is because I've never done it, but there must be a point where it's like, okay, now we can kickstart this and start pushing it and put together videos and stuff. But I'll be honest, I've never done a Kickstarter campaign. But what I hear is that it is the last step, and you're driving people to Kickstarter with your own marketing rather than relying on Kickstarter to do any marketing for you, because they just really don't. Like I found the other day, I tried to look up wargames on Kickstarter, and it's not easy. They're so buried under people selling STL files that it took ages of scrolling to even get. If I type wargame in, it's just STL files of models for people to game with, and quite frustrating. So I guess it is what it is. It's useful if you already have the community, but you can't really rely on them to do anything for you beyond that.
I think you're 100% accurate. From what the research that I've done, and there was a game that just kickstarted yesterday, and they've already over $1 million. But they funded in like 2 minutes. And you don't fund in 2 minutes by people finding your Kickstarter randomly. To your point, they built a community either through previous games or just through their marketing effort. So when that campaign went live, people were already lined up to buy it. So I think you're 100% accurate on that. And part of why I even started a channel and am on Twitter is to, one, I want to find like-minded people that like to design games, board games, and play them, and then build that network up so that if I do want to self-publish, that at least 2 or 3 of you might buy the game. So it's not just my mom, as it were.
But in that sense, oh, sorry, Richard, you can go.
Valid reason, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for the jam, in what circumstance would the 5 of us be talking right now, right?
No,
We wouldn't be here right now, you know.
it'd just be Jay and I sitting around yelling at each other.
And maybe I'd show up someday, but
I'm kidding.
But,
we don't yell at each other. Well,
makes
cool.
it
Okay.
interesting.
So I know that you said that you can only be on for about 90 minutes. So and we're getting on to, we're not even close. We're almost at an hour. So.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Cool. I just want to make sure that we're okay there.
I might be able to stretch it. We'll see how we go.
Fair enough. Well, you're more than welcome to stay all night, however long we go. But so with the Dietz Foundation, quick update on that. I probably should have done that at the top of the show. We've got 3 weeks, and I'm going to keep saying this every show, to the end of the month to finalize your uploads. Now, you've done it 7 times. So is it just easy enough to delete and re-upload? You don't lose your link or anything like that?
No, it's fine.
Cool. Okay. Because I haven't done that yet. I've got a misspelling. And then, excuse me.
You can even upload the new version of the file, a new file, while retaining previous versions.
Okay.
And they stay available on each.
Perfect. Okay. So at the end of the month, once that's done, whatever's there, I'm going to pull down or whatever I need to do and work with the Dietz Foundation and get that sent over to them so that we can then find a printer, and they're going to, and I don't want to commit because until we know what the costs are. I've already made that mistake of overcommitting on this jam. But there's a chance that everybody will get a copy. It might be something where you got to pay the shipping. I don't know, but I'm gonna try to make it as cheap as possible, because it wasn't about making money with this jam, but because it's a nonprofit and they reached out to me, and I did throw it up on Twitter, and basically everybody said, "Yeah, great idea, do it." So we're gonna go ahead and do that. But you got to the end of the month to make whatever changes you want to make, and then we're going to ship it with a disclaimer that basically says, "As is, people. You buy it, you play it. They should work, but if they don't, it's part of the jam. That's why we do what we do."
Some are completely untested. They might have spelling errors.
Any clues as to what those might be?
I've gone through mine. I don't have spelling errors that I'm aware of. That being said, completely unplay tested.
Well, your idea came to you while driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was driving home from a game convention, and in the last hour and a half of the 3.5-hour drive, I came up with it. I mean, from inception of idea to shit, I got to write this down as soon as I get home.
Nice. And that kind of leads into the topic. Am I doing this right? What do we do once we take an idea? How quickly do we get prototypes built? And playtesting. What's the importance of playtesting? Why do we playtest? How do you guys go about doing it? And what do we expect to hear back from people who playtest? And I'll start a little bit on this topic. I know myself, I've had games where, for example, I have one that deals with Navratri, which is an Indian celebration. It basically means 9 nights. And I was talking, the company I work for, we have an office in India. And I was talking with people there, and I was, saying, yeah, I do some game design and things like that. And they're like, "Oh, you got to design us a game." Like it's that easy. And the next day I had one. It was very
that easy.
Apparently. And I went from idea to 3 rounds of playtesting and prototype built in 8 hours. And that was probably 90% of the game that with further playtesting with real people got polished. And so it can happen. But I know, like with the tank, the paper crafting, I have a paper cutter. I keep stock of cardboard in my place. I have different colored printer paper so that when I get an idea, I can make a prototype, because I can find very quickly if an idea in my brain physically works. Because sometimes you think, oh, you could do this and do that, and then you lay it out and go, yeah, that doesn't work at all, and it might lead to further ideas. The initial version of pretty much, I was going to bring out Mythic, but pretty much every game I've ever designed never survives from idea to first prototype to when I get closer to it being finished. Most of the time, it's a completely different game. And here's somebody who would know. Hi, Mike. How are you, sir? Unfortunately, for every 10 play testers, maybe 2 will actually play test enough to help.
Agreed.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
Now, what I've done is I joined a meetup group of board gamers. Now, keep in mind, this is with Mythic, which is a board game, okay? A hobby game. And what I would do is I'd show up to play. And in San Diego, there's a fairly active board game community that plays. Before COVID, you could almost find a game night somewhere around the city 7 nights a week. And so I joined a couple of these groups, and I would show up and play games. And then I'd say, oh, by the way, I've got this, if anybody wants to play test it. And so I was able to find a lot of live, for the most part, random play testers to sit down and play my game. And one of the techniques that I would use is I would not play when I was having people play test. because I found that I habitually know the game and will do certain things without explaining what I'm doing because I've done it so many times. And so
I
I
have
like
no idea what you're talking about.
so what I like to do is just put it on the table, give a basic overview, and then let people play with it and see what their initial reaction is to the components, what seems to be intuitive about the design, and let them go through setting it up for the most part. Now, some of the stuff I might have set up or laid out so they could find it. It wasn't like, here's a box, open it and go from there. But, and then for me, and I would highly recommend this, you listen. And I'm going to say never. Take this for what it's worth. I never, when somebody gives me an idea, say, oh, I already thought of that. It doesn't work. I never say that. If I've already tested something and I know it doesn't work and somebody says, you should do this broken idea, I say, thank you very much. I'll give that a shot. Because you want to encourage people to play your game and know that they can share their ideas without you shooting everything down. Because it's not about validating you or your ego. It's about getting feedback that you can honestly take and look at your game from as best you can from their point of view and make whatever changes make sense. And I at one point I had a dice to determine when Bigfoot would show up in my game. And I thought it was so cool. I had this big white dice that I hand drawn all my Bigfoots on. And one playtest session, 3 or 4 people go, you should just lose the dice. And my first inside feeling was, screw that. I love rolling the dice. I'm not getting rid of it. 2 days later, the game had no dice. Because I thought about what they said, and I said, okay, maybe I don't agree with it, but let me see if I can make that work. Let me see if I can solve that problem they just gave me. I love that dice. I don't want to get rid of it, but let me. Number one rule for me is try to reduce the number of components in a game, because it's going to make it more likely you can get it published if you don't have 800 components. Go ahead, Chris.
So your first mistake is saying a dice.
A die?
It's a die.
Yeah,
Die
you talked about this
singular,
last time.
Dice is plural. I don't care what the British say; they're wrong.
Hey, I do it your way, and I'm officially using British English over here. So
You're using Kiwi English just like we're using American English. It's not the same. I kid.
So I'll go ahead and open it up for more discussion. But that's the one never is just always take whatever advice or input you get. Thank the playtester, even if you've already play tested and removed it from your game.
Right, exactly.
So what is
I'll show you, just since we're talking about playtesting and since Ryszard raised it, you asked why I didn't have, is this coming through?
Yeah,
This
it
is
is.
my original sketch. And you can see there's 3 lanes. So,
Yep.
There it is. I don't know what changed. I don't know if it's playtesting. It might have been my own playtesting because this was the next one I did, which you can see is hand drawn. And there you've got the 2 lanes. And so it would have been my own playtesting that caused that. Now I'm big. Whoa, okay, hi. And then I went out to some of my friends who offered to play test it, and one of them played it with me, and it's exactly what you were saying, that every time I was doing stuff and kind of explaining it, but then I would just do things because I knew that there were things I could do. Subconscious, it's completely subconscious because you've been immersed in the rules for so long, you don't even realize you're doing it. And even changing rules on the fly that I'd actually, in my head, at some point, the rule had changed, but I'd never got around to writing it down. So now they've read the rules and they're like, wait a minute, why are you doing that? And the number of small rules that have changed in SplinterCard since I started it is just so much so that I have to read my own rules before I play it each time now just to remember where I'm up to. Right.
Okay, for your first, you said this was the first game that you've ever designed?
Yeah, the first one I've ever let anyone play test.
Okay. Well, you are officially a designer. Just hearing you say the same things that all of us have gone through, yeah, you're
Right.
one of us. Officially. Not that you needed to hear that, but I'm sharing it anyway.
And that's and the thing that you were saying about not letting your ego, man, that's hard though. When they say, and it's not just something you've tried that you know won't work, it's just if they have even a good piece of advice that you've never heard, still your first instinct is just to go, oh no, but I designed it because of this, this, and this, and these are the reasons. And for example, one guy said, like, I really like it, but I hate how short it is because there's these massive swings and he's winning and now I'm winning and then I lose and I don't know what happened. It all happened so fast and the game was over in 10 minutes. Can it just be a whole lot longer so I can build up a strategy? And my first instinct was to say, yeah, that's the point. I like that. I like the craziness and let's go on. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And that's what he said. And then he never really gave me any more feedback. So there you go.
That's kind of to my point, right? Because now I'm going to Monday morning quarterback here. A good response to something like that is a great idea that would totally work in a much larger formatted game. And this is a smaller game, but I'm going to keep that in mind because I might make this larger and I could totally use that idea. So you can acknowledge that it's a great idea that, hey, I might actually put it in another game and I'll see if it fits here. But if not, I'm going to use it maybe in a bigger design where, yeah, you've got more time to play because your game isn't designed to go long. It's to be short and sweet. And if you screw up or you lose, play it again. It takes 10 minutes because your game is not going to be for everybody their flavor, right? But so yeah, you kind of experience that playtesters get shut down if you, and I don't want to generalize, but if you come across as a designer that's protecting the design and defensive, then there may be somebody listening to that conversation that might have some good input that's going to go, yeah, I'm not even going to share because I don't want to get my head bitten off. So.
And never be married to an idea. There are exceptions to that rule, but that's one thing that I've definitely had to, in the several different game designs have been rolling around in my head before. Sometimes you have to, if something isn't working exactly the way you want it, step back and maybe, swing around and come at it at a different direction. And if it ends up, you've got to kick something out of what you already have to make it work better. Be ready to do that.
Hello.
Like I said, there are exceptions to that rule.
Hello.
But you were asking about how quickly you go from idea to prototype. I showed these on my show the other night. I'm going to go ahead and share them here. This is one of the. This may be the second version of my ship charts for my Ocean Thunder game. If you want to embiggen me there, boss.
Yes, sir.
So the idea for Ocean Thunder came up.
Well, clearly Rob didn't draw them.
No, he didn't. And I know it looks like a 9-year-old drew them, but no, it was a 21-year-old.
I love the carrots that you have on the ship deck. Those are my favorite.
Yeah. These right here.
No, I love it. The carrots. You guys know a show called VeggieTales? I used to work on that. So this is right on.
I used to love that show.
So where Ocean Thunder's inception came from, where my buddy Chris Copeland and I came up with it, is that I got a hold of a copy of and you can make me smaller now if you want. Got a copy of General Quarters, the very first version of General Quarters, the Red Book, and we played it on my living room floor using the Axis and Allies ships miniatures, battleships, even battleships, aircraft carriers, and aircraft carriers. We didn't have there's no destroyers, so we used the transports as destroyers / cruisers, and we didn't like the play style. It seemed too what's the word I'm looking for? Generic. Because USS Missouri had the exact same number of hull points as USS Fletcher class destroyer. And yeah, it was due to how things were in the rules, it was more difficult to sink the Missouri than it was to sink the Fletcher class destroyer. Something just didn't sit right in our brains that both ships only had 4 hull points. You do 4 points of damage to both ships and they sink. Then that just didn't feel right. And so we started making, this change and that change, and we took their ship chart which was, just a little no bigger than, it was actually half the size of a poker card in size, and you had multiple on a single sheet. We started working on that, and my wife at the time said, if you're making all these changes, why don't you just come up with your own rules?
Right.
And we went, well, let's think about what we want to see on the ship information chart, and that this is the very first inception of the roll to see where the hit goes on, the damage chart. This is, for anybody that has seen my game, I now have a grid that overlays the plan of the ship, the overhead of the ship, and this is the very first inception of it.
So
And
how
this
much
was like-
playtesting do you think that you've got from, and I know the game takes a while to play, so I won't ask you hours because it's probably quite a bit, but you've had this for 15, 20 years, and you take it to conventions, right? And you teach people and playtest with people who've never seen it.
We started basically all of our playtesting, except for the very, maybe first couple of months, which were done in my front room, and then we moved into my basement. First couple of months, maybe 6 to 9 months, were at home, but then we felt it was in a good enough condition to take it to a convention, and it's been run. I would say it's been run at least, over the last 30 years, it's been run at least 40 different conventions.
Wow.
At least 2 times per convention. There was one year at skirmishes in the mid 90s. We actually ran 12 sessions in that one weekend.
Okay.
The game was so popular from the year before that when the convention coordinators were setting the games up, slotting them and whatnot, they called me and said, "Hey, noticed you only had 4 slots for Ocean Thunder. We already have more requests than you've got slots. Can you run one every slot?" Yeah.
And,
sure.
and that's when you negotiate a pay increase.
Yeah. Well, I was part of the convention, so just like I'm part of the convention at March to Victory.
Yeah.
I was part of the convention.
As you're going through this, obviously it's 30 years, and all games take their own path. We as designers sometimes deal with the imposter syndrome. Maybe we don't know how we're going to get it published. Who do we pitch it to? And this whole process, were you actively playtesting it, or was it in your mind, hey, this is pretty much a done game. I'm going to go play 12 games of it, and you might pick up some feedback, or was that active playtesting? Because I think there's a difference there.
So it was. So there, to me, I think there's a difference. There's a difference between active playtesting and then playing the game and realizing, hey, we need to make a change, and making that change as if you were getting feedback from an active playtest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's hard to plan for, right? That's a bit more organic.
Yeah, and so we didn't ever go out until earlier this spring, when I sent the rules to Erich and Ryszard, and you. I had never sent the game to somebody sight unseen before.
Ah, okay.
So I have never had play testers take my rules, shred them apart as needed, and provide me with feedback. So it's very difficult to take something that has been in my life the last 30 years and I've loved and coddled and held close to my heart, and put it out into the cold, hard world to get hit by a Mack truck.
It's a piece of your soul by that point.
I wasn't that bad, was I?
No, not at all. No, and I truly appreciate. But there is a level of trepidation. There's a level of what if they don't like it? What if they come back and say, "What is this shit that you sent me? This is garbage. I would never want to play anything like this."
What kind of useful feedback is this?
You bring up a point. I had somebody that was making a dungeon game with a pencil flicking, and it's kind of an agility game. And when I got it, I looked at it and I was honest. I went back to the designer and I said, I'm going to be honest. I am not a fan of agility-based games, like flicking a coin to knock down a miniature or anything like that. And so I'm going to back out of playtesting your game because my bias to these types of games, I just don't like. And what you're going to hear from me is probably not going to be useful because I'm not your target. And so if somebody doesn't say that to you as a designer, I think you need to recognize somebody that this might not be their style of game. And
Right.
of course, it's speculation. You don't know unless they come out and go, like you said, ships.
What?
I hate ships. Why can't these be tanks? Or something like that.
Right.
Why can't these be Greeks?
Why can't they be tanks? But if it's tanks, it'd be called pasture thunder.
Pasture thunder sounds like something for retired sailors.
Yeah.
A lot of that around these parts.
Let me read Mike's
The Neuro game
comment
now.
here real quick. So Mike says, I should qualify help. Those are the testers who play the game multiple times enough to really understand the game and give much needed feedback.
Right.
So I think he brings up a pretty good point here. There is the random player that's going to give you some raw feedback. You're going to have designers who are going to give you designer feedback. And then you may have your power players or whatever you want to call them that know war games, let's say if it's a war game, and are going to play your game, like as he points out, enough to know whether that chip pull system that you put in is really accomplishing what you want, because they're going to look at it and go, oh, this is much like XYZ game. I like how that plays. Or, oh, this is a little rough. Or those odds don't seem about right. And you can get that valuable feedback from somebody that randomly at a convention sits down and plays and doesn't realize that maybe they just got the dice rolls that gave you that small percentage chance of something happening, and then think your game is all about that outcome. And so
Right.
you have to, as a designer, kind of filter that to some degree. And I think what Mike points out is by having somebody that plays it multiple times, they'll self-filter.
Right.
And this is a marketing problem too. So So on the one hand, you've got those power players, you've got your designers, you've got your different people who are testing the game. And yes, they might be able to test it a whole lot and find all the problems with it. But also at the same time, you need to test with the random people as well, because their response is really important, because they're most likely the ones who are giving you the money at the end of the day if you're trying to sell this, or depending who your market is, right? And so just because a game it's like take StarCraft, the computer game, incredibly tight, perfectly balanced, amazing competitive scene. It's dying off a little bit now, but then the barrier to entry for a new player is extremely high, and people just don't really necessarily have any fun at first. And there's a disconnect there. So the game has become for the power players, and that may be part of the reason they're shrinking. Whereas you take something like Fortnite, which who knows, it's kind of all over the place competitively. It's not that great, but it's fun for the randoms who show up. But how do you get that testing? And that's what I don't really know, but my gut says if you have enough random testers, yes, they might be playing it once and giving you low quality feedback on an individual level, but if there's enough of them, then over a cohort, you'll get really good feedback. So
exactly. Yeah, and like I said, in those 40 conventions that I've been to over the years, I've actually had both. In the first 4 or 5 years when I was running it at skirmishes, I had this one group of guys and girls that came down from Nebraska. The first year, it was the first year of the convention. They just randomly showed up as, hey, we heard there was a game convention. We thought it'd be fun to, get some games in. They played my game the first session, and they stayed at my table the entire week, or the entire weekend. And then the following year, they just set up camp. They brought their cooler.
So that's some valuable feedback, right?
Right. They were so enthralled with the game, and they weren't historical miniatures wargamers. They were D&D guys. They were 40K guys. Which they weren't historical miniatures wargamers. They were D&D guys. They were 40K guys.
We have an echo from somebody.
They weren't historical miniatures wargamers. They were D&D guys. They were 40K guys.
We have an echo from somebody. Okay, who's got the echo?
Not me, because I'm in my head.
there it is.
It's SPQR. I figured it out.
Oh, okay. But what I was saying is, they never saw themselves as being historical wargamers, and they ended up, the 4 or 5 years that skirmishes ran, they would come down just to play Ocean Thunder, and they would give me feedback like, hey, I like the changes you made, like, this, I like that, et cetera and so forth. Like, hey, I like the yeah, it's but then I also had the individual, they come play one game and say, yeah, I really like that, or I didn't think that this would work out well, or I thought this was cool. And you take it to heart, because I've had each session I would have between 4 and I've had as many as 10 people play the game. So I've had hundreds of people play the game. Some of it quality feedback, some of it, oh, thanks for letting me play. Had a good time.
Yeah. Hey, but at least they had a good time that day, right?
Yeah.
So Mike Bertelli, for those of you who don't know, he has got quite a few games published. So this is not, what we're talking about is not his first rodeo. And he says, in my humble opinion, the first 90% of game design is easy. That's the fun stuff. True. It's the last 10% that's a nightmare. Finalizing a rule book, proofing, counter layout, it's just brutal.
Yep.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
I'm at that. I'm right now. I'm at that about that 80 to 85%. It's still. I'm still in the fun part because I'm finalizing some basic concepts.
Mhm.
But I'm about to get to the finalizing of the rule book and proofing the editing process, and yeah.
So, question:
Ryszard,
how will you know when it's ready?
Never.
I think it's
I-
like
I-
writing a book. You
Never.
can keep tweaking. You can keep tweaking all the time that you want.
Yeah.
Okay, not ready, then good enough to pull the trigger and say,
Exactly.
all right, let's go to market. When is that?
Two ideas.
For me, it's just going to be. I know in my mind there's a handful of things left that I want to make sure I've got, and when I've got them there, I'm just going to have to do it. I've been sitting on it long enough. 30 years of sitting on this egg. This sucker's ready to hatch.
so Mike says games are never done designing; they just get published.
Yeah.
Or go on a shelf for 30 years.
Hence expansions.
Yeah.
And errata.
Lots of it.
One last thing, real quick, talking about, this is the other thing that you, in my opinion, you absolutely have to do, is keep a hold of everything that you have ever done with the game. This is a copy of the very first written version. It's on an old dot matrix printer.
And you printed it on yellow paper. That's kind of cool.
Actually, it's recycled paper, so it was very similar to this color already. But if you can hear it, it is.
Yeah. You need to put that under glass, boss.
It's damn near parchment.
I think I've got the audio fixed.
There we go. Hey, welcome to the show, boss.
But yeah, you got to keep a hold of it. And for me, it's there are games out there that have similar names to Ocean Thunder, and when I do actually go to publish, if somebody comes at me and says, "Hey, you can't use that name," dude, unless you had this going before 1991, step off. Because
Unless it's Game Workshop, then maybe you take a different stance.
you know what? No, I don't care. Yeah, they could sue the living daylights out of me. I'm not going to change it because, if they can prove in a court of law that they had this idea before 1991, great.
Man, NotJay is ornery.
You stuff can't workshop.
So let's go around and get some. I want to hear Ryszard and Erich, and I'm just going to call you SPQR.
2K works.
That's shorter, and kind of get your guys' thoughts on your approach, if you have one, to what you do with your playtesting and kind of how you handle the feedback. So Ryszard, why don't you start off, sir?
So the first I want to reach out to what was already said. Hisi, you described how you established contact with potential testers. We as designers, we need testers, but what you have done in your example was go out there not to look for the people who would play your game, and you started asking them, would you play, would you try my design? You just establish the contact with them. Because one of the difficulties that I certainly enjoy as a young and upcoming designer is that, there are so many games on the market. Who wants to play one more that no one have heard on? off. I can go to the friendly local game store, and those people that are there already to spend their next few minutes, hours playing some games that they arranged for, they are not there to play my game. So I have to smoothen the road towards this testing a little bit by reciprocity, I suppose.
A little bit of that, yes. But I'll
So
tell you, I have a white box with the Bigfoot logo on it. And what I do is I set it out. And just curiosity will bring people and go, well, what is that? Well, I'm glad that you asked. And then I go into my spiel.
Well, Rob has a tank. You have a logo. I have images taken from the internet. So the testers are difficult to obtain and retain, because the most valuable ones are, just like Mike Bertuccelli has said, that those are the people who accompany your design. So it's not just the remark like about your die that you have to lose the die from your design because it doesn't work. I want to have testers that can learn the nuances of the game, and if I make a tweak in the system, that they comment on this because they can compare the previous iteration to the current one. But well, so for that to happen, you have to retain those testers. You have to have those helpers, really. So I do not know. I hope that I wasn't shutting off my testers, but because they are silent, maybe I have done exactly that.
Well, let me
I
ask
don't
you
know.
specifically. You were at San Diego Histicon playing one of your games.
Mhm.
Was that a finished game, or was that you're looking for playtesting and people knew that it was a playtest that they were doing?
So the problem with the San Diego a few months ago was that there were actually two games that I've brought of my own. One was just a demonstration, and it's a completely unfinished business. Second was, well, it was few months ago. It's not the current iteration anymore, but it was as ready as it could be on that day. So it was kind of ready and ready to be presented if needs be. The When it comes to the San Diego experience, it's just that this this is not nothing against your community, Hisi, but in San Diego there was the floor prepared for the designers, basically a space where people were able to demonstrate their designs, and then there was a floor for the gamers where people just come to play games. And the events were scheduled online, but what I have found out was that demonstrations were done on the designer floor, in the designer chamber room. So I was able to mingle with the designers, but the accidental passers-by, they just didn't happen. They were downstairs.
Another cat guy. We love it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So there's that,
oh,
I
great.
suppose.
Get down here.
It happens with the live animals. You have always unscripted.
So Mike Berticelli says, very important to have a very good-looking playtest copy to catch potential players' eyes. That advice also works with online dating sites. This look,
Hissy.
no, not going to work.
This is the subject that as a married person, I will not pick up. I will not even comment on.
So Meandering Mike, hi boss, how are you? He says, what Chris says is so true about documentation or document retention and preservation. I lost everything on my second PBM game design, and about 60% of my first PBM design is from the mid 80s, so nothing was digital. And I think I shared my box of cards of the first iteration of Richthofen, which is a full-blown CCG. And I go look at the cards now, and because I lost the rules, I have nomenclature on there that I can't even figure out what it is anymore. So yeah, good point, Chris. Thank you, Mike. And another Mike.
I will just finish my wrap up with one sentence. What is valuable is also, even if we do not have the testers around, that we ourselves put the game through the hoops. Just like Rob has mentioned that I think if I remember right, Rob, you said that the testers commented that there is the way to denote that units are not available, that they are eliminated for the round.
Yeah.
Such things to notice how the components of your game function when you are going through the mechanics. This is something that you can do even on your own as a designer, just playing your game. And it's easier if someone else is doing this for you. But well, it's not only enough to think of your game and mechanics, it's useful to put it to use, just to see what works, what feels a little awkward, or what can be improved. I'm done. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, with that in mind, what Ryszard just said is very important too, because sometimes you find that designers don't have that organic answer that you're looking for, as in the rule might not be on paper, but the designer who's played the game so many times already knows from, uh, he just knows.
This is how it always worked.
Right.
Yep.
Definitely noticed
Because
that with the postcards. Yeah.
yeah, so just like Ryszard said, it's if you put the game through the right hoops and you press it against, at some point you'll find out oh hey, I'm missing that chart right here. Oh hey, I'm missing what can I do in between actions here? You will see those trends pop through your game, and the final test is to just take a prototype with whatever rules you come up with, give it to someone, your victim of choice, and run away. Come back half an hour later.
Yeah.
Hey, how's the game? If they say, I can't play this, there you go. That's another answer too, because it's very easy for you to explain a game to anybody, right? It's simple. I mean, we can explain a game, probably, a complicated game in maybe half an hour. Just the bare bones, obviously. I'm not talking about the grand strategic board games here.
Right.
Most games, 15, 20 minutes, people to get the rules. But, if your prototype or your semi-finished board game can be played by a complete stranger, and I'm talking about even inside your own household. I'm not even talking about conventions or, something very simple, right? Your neighbor. Take a prototype, give it to your neighbor. Come back in 3 days. You're gonna have great feedback, or at least enough feedback that you're gonna be like, okay, I played war games with this guy for 20 years. He can't figure out my game. There's something wrong.
Yeah.
I end here.
And Mike talking about his latest design, Wolfpack. He says, that's so true. It just happened to me this week with Wolfpack, something we do a lot, and somehow it didn't get in the rules. And that kind of goes to the point I was saying earlier, that as designers, we intuitively will do things with our designs when we have people play test, because we know it. And so we'll just do certain things, and it may not be in the rules, or the rules have changed. And so, yeah, I'm a big proponent of give people the components and let them figure out. Now, if you need to step in and go, okay, that wasn't in the rules, make a note to keep them moving. You don't want the playtest session to break down.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you that the smile on somebody's face when they're playtesting and you react, and I'm talking about an honest reaction. You don't fake anything. At least I try not to. Where you're like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. And you start thinking about how you can integrate that into your game. People that play test your game really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh, also, Mike did have a little advice on the dating sites, although that needs to be play tested, my friend. I'm not sure how accurate that statement is.
I'm married too, so I can't speak to that. I've actually got to go, but I will just wrap by saying, for me, all feedback is feedback. If someone doesn't want to play your game when you give it to them, that's kind of feedback, right? Like that I gave it to a friend's son who was about 14 years old. My previous version, not this one, but the bigger one. He never got around to it because it was just too complicated. That's feedback. So, or the way I've written it must not be that engaging, or that kind of thing. But that's as far as I've gone with playtesting. The question I really have, which I would like to ask people who have, especially people who have published, but just anyone really, how much playtesting is enough playtesting to be confident to go to market, or at least to go public if you're not going to market as such? Because it sounds like Ocean Thunder has had plenty of playtesting, but you're not quite there yet. Whereas other games seem to go from 0 to done to published within, no time at all. So how do you know? Is my question. Obviously, a game is never finished, but it's just published. As Mike says, where is that line? And
I think the answer is 42.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go with that.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, with that, sorry, I need to go, so I'm going to leave you with that, and I'm going to come back and listen to whatever your answers are.
Awesome. Thank you, boss. I really appreciate you being on, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, guys.
Care,
Thank you.
So the answer for me,
Chris, let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, if you're still there, if you want to jump on and join the conversation, there is a link to StreamYard on the Discord in the channel for the podcast. And you're more than welcome, my friend, to pop on, and you can tell us a little bit about your Wolfpack if you want. Although at some point I would like to have you on as a featured guest, but feel free if you want to join us this evening. And same with you, Mike, or anybody that's in chat, if you want to pop in and share your thoughts on playtesting and the experiences that you've had. Sorry, go ahead, go right ahead.
No, it's okay. So for me with Ocean Thunder, it's been, like I said, I have until earlier this spring, I had not had anybody take the rules sight unseen and look them over.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, I think Erich mentioned this, that he feels that the game is good to go with just a couple of clarifications and a couple of changes as the game itself. Now, the actual book layout and all that's got a ways to go, but I've been at this stage with the game probably 2 or 3 years at this point.
Okay.
Now, given that I've been working on this for 30 years, it has not been a constant 30 years.
Right.
To be fair, I did step away from it for about 6 or 7 years, where I didn't even touch it because I was so burned out on it. Because it was every single convention I could go to, I went to just get people to play the game to see what they thought. So, I finally came back to it, made some, because it is very much a game of the 80s and 90s to an extent. And I've wanted to streamline it some, and I have. Believe it or not, I have. This is a streamlined version to what originally came out. So I've always in the back of my head, I always thought, well, maybe someday if I get it, I'll think about publishing it, And of course, this was all the way back before there was self-publishing. It
right.
would be now. I won't name any names, but a well-known author did come to me after playing the game and say, "Hey, what do you need to get this to publish? Now, this was back in the late 90s, but he was willing to financially support it going to publication.
Hey, Mike.
I didn't have I don't know. I didn't have the wherewithal, as it were, to bring it to fruition at the time. So
that happens to all of us, though, boss.
And-
I'm still like that with my Richtofen game. It's 20 some years, and
yeah, but he was ready to take it to, put his name behind it, to take it to to publish through a game company.
okay. So with that in mind, and the feedback you got from Erich, I'm expecting that this is going to get published this year, right? Pressure.
Yeah.
You know what I'm expecting?
What's that?
Mini Ocean Thunder, the postcard game.
Well, I'm already thinking about card game.
And
There you go.
that's still festering. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. So 2K, why don't you just kind of tell us who you are a little of your background, and kind of how you fit into some of any games you've designed, and a little your thoughts on playtesting.
First of all, thanks for letting me get in the room. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I have never, ever attempted to create a game. I have never been in playtesting at a convention. I've never experienced those things. Did I think about these things? Yes, all the time. Playtesting fascinates me. Game design, absolutely fascinating. To get inside the guy's or girl's head that created the game or the rules, I want to hear it. I want to know what they're thinking. I want to hear the pain. I want to hear this. This is good stuff, and that's
Awesome.
why.
Nice. So I'm going to stay on you to maybe get you to do your own game in the next game jam. So, and if not, no pressure. But
I fantasize, dream.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Of creating a solitaire game.
Okay.
The reason being is that one game I played that was solitaire, B-17, Queen of the Skies, blew my mind. To take a complex problem child like taking bombers out and turning into such a simple, easy solitaire that you're glued, you're addicted to it, and you understand it. And something like that appeals to me, and it has for decades. I don't know a thing about creating a game or anything like that, but the best thing to do is just to be quiet and listen to people who have.
Fair enough. But I will say, one of the things that we want to do here is to encourage people like you that might have a game in them to see our trials, our pain, the mistakes that we make, and the successes along the way, and realize that sometimes just getting a design that, even if it's not published, and I can speak with my Richtofen game, it won a game design contest. It's on BGG. 40-odd people have made comments about it and what Chris has experienced. And we're not technically published. And when you can create something, go ahead, Ryszard.
I want to say that designer is the person who designs. Publisher is the person who publishes. So to be a designer, design.
Good point. Now, you could maybe do both. But there's a certain amount of joy when you create something, and I'm sure this is for any type of artist, and somebody else experiences it, and you see them smile, or you see them engaged in what you're doing. And by the way, 2K has a YouTube channel as well, and I will put a link to his channel in the show notes. And I think you're on turn 4050 of your current Gettysburg play, right?
38.
38. But let me point something out. He says he's not a designer, but in one of the first episodes, he starts marking the map with Sharpies and laying things out. That is design, my friend. And it's raw as form.
You've been caught.
Didn't even think about it. See?
I was watching it, and for one, I was cringing because I can't Sharpie my maps. That's just me. But as he's doing it, he's explaining.
That's what the plexiglass is for.
Don't burst his bubble. But my point is, he was going through and he's saying, I'm marking this map so that I can see where my artillery, and that process, that's design.
Absolutely.
You're just taking a game that already exists and you're making it fit your play style. And you're, especially when you look at a map and you're saying, this is what I'd like to see on a map. That is the essence of game design, what you were doing. So just FYI. And now, Mike, Meandering Mike, why don't you share some of your thoughts, my friend? Because I know that you did not do a game in the jam, and his reason was that he was taking a design class, which is not a requirement, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, boss.
Okay, you caught me mid-meandering away from the computer. I was rinsing off my palette. I'm in the middle of painting.
Oh, you're like a cat.
Yeah. So I got started game design really young, just doing stuff for myself, like making variants of SPI games, making my own maps and things like that. I did run play-by-mail games in the 80s. One was called Fantasy Empire Builder and one was called Galaxy Spawn. And
now, were those your designs?
Those were my designs, and I ran the company, and I had no more than 12 people playing. It was all friends and just a couple people that I had played with in other play-by-mail games, and they were all paper and pencil accounting. And I actually decided to start learning how to computer program because I wanted to convert my system to, a computerized accounting system. And once I, got involved with that, I never went back. And, that was my career for the next 30 years after that was
nice
computer programming. So, but somewhere along the line I also had done a role-playing game in high school called Wizards and Warriors and Wanderers that I created in between the release of Dungeons and Dragons, the Blue Box. They had come out with the Monster Manual for AD&D version 1. They hadn't yet come out with the Player's Handbook. And we wanted to play more stuff and not wait. And so between Dungeons and Dragons and the Wizards and Melee board games from Metagaming, Wizard might not have come out yet, but Melee had, and Empire of the Peloton, I created my role-playing game sort of in between the cracks of those.
I argue to this day, Melee is one of the best short 1v1 or 1v2 or whatever combat games if you're doing gladiatorial type of things.
Yeah, quick, dirty, easy, pretty realistic. I mean, not completely, but enough.
And you can narrate. We used to get together and have tournaments, and it was basically King of the Hill. See who could stay alive the longest, and we would sit there and play Melee all night. Oh, I love that game, and it came in a little bitty plastic thing. It was called a pocket game, I think. I think that's what they called it.
They had the plastic boxes, but at first they came in Ziplocs.
Yeah, I think mine was a Ziploc, and then Car Wars I got in the little thin plastic box or wallet, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So we're old, my friend. Yeah.
So, but as I was, working in the computer world and all that, in the back of my mind, I thought someday I'll get back to games. I played computer games and stuff, but I didn't really want to get involved with game development. But then I actually did in the mid 90s decide to actually give game development a try on the computer. I started doing coding in Visual Basic as prototypes, tabletop, like Windows game packs that used to come with all the little card games, like Free Cell and stuff like that. But
right, I remember those.
I created about 5 different little games, and I'd actually gone to the Game Developers Conference in Santa Clara.
Well, this is what this is.
Yep.
GDC, Game Developer Conference.
It was right when Miller Friedman had bought them out, and Chris Crawford had basically got screwed out when he gave it over to the current board, and then they sold out to Miller Friedman. all sorts of nasty stuff behind the scenes that I was privy to because I was a assistant sysop on the game dev CompuServe forum.
Oh, wow.
So I heard a lot of this stuff. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I couldn't make any money at it at that time. I was trying to do, shareware and stuff. And it's like, nope, Doom worked, but Command and Conquer and Warcraft were taken off. It's like, okay, you need, big budget stuff. So
I did shareware and got published in Japan.
Sweet.
And I actually had a game that was put into a game store. I think I made $300 off a bingo game. It wasn't anything. Well, it was kind of cool. Written in Visual Basic. It was VB.
Yeah, it was more than I made. So I went back to computer programming, and eventually I knew, like, when I retire, that's when I'll get back into game development. Yeah. And so I was planning my retirement, and so I started taking some online courses, and a lot of them were telling me, you really should prototype on paper first. You should maybe try, not necessarily a board game version.
You're talking about computer design. They were saying prototype computer games
on paper first. And so I actually started getting back into board games and got hooked. And so I wanted to rebuy everything I had in my youth, and then everything that I'd seen in my youth that I didn't get to buy. And then I kept going. And so I'm now a total addict. You've seen my profile on Board Game Geek. I'm insane. But so I did retire.
Even on Facebook, every group that I go to join, you're already there.
I'm not in them all. I'm not in all of them.
Okay.
Many.
I haven't found one that you're not in. Let's just say that.
But so yeah, now I'm retired. So I started a channel and to play games and share some of my experiences playing old games, and now finally I was going to start working on my old designs, but then when I started taking the class, which was the instructor was Liz Davidson of the Beyond Solitaire podcast, and there's also an academic sponsor from Central Michigan University, but she was the lead of the course.
I'm hoping to have her on this podcast because she with David Thompson are designing Night Witches.
Yes, yeah,
she will be at the San Diego Histicon for anybody local that wants to meet her, and supposedly they're going to bring a copy of the game. So I'm going to chase her down and get her on the show.
So I sort of got inspired by her enthusiasm, very infectious, and just started to work on a new design. And so one of my favorite designs of all time is Britannia by Louis Pulsifer, sort of the experiential draw that I had of that game of living history, that long period of time, and sort of feeling that I was in it. You don't identify with any king or a particular nation or tribe because you're playing multiple, but I felt as part of the land of Britain being subjected to all these invasions and strife and warfare, and I wanted to try to recreate an experience like that where someone could actually do it. So my current game design is on the Magyars from their origin in the eastern lands near the Urals and the Caspian, moving into the north of the Black Sea, and
very cool.
Carpathians and all that. So that's sort of my current design, even though I still have on the back burner other ideas percolating.
Now that sounds like something Ryszard would be interested in.
Polish people, we have a little bit of history with Magyars, yes. And Hungarians as well.
I was bringing that also to because of the ancients, and I'm not sure where this falls on the calendar, but it's probably close, right? Historically,
relatively speaking, it really depends. Man, Mike, you speak.
Yeah, so the start of this game would be about 400 to 600 BC, and they worked their way over towards the Black Sea, and they're dealing with the Khazar Khanate, and the Magyars in the 800, 900 AD were one of the most fearsome land raiders, going all the way from Iberia down into Byzantium, all through Francia, the Aquitaine, into northern Italy, and there was the Huns, and then there was the Magyars, and then there was the Mongols, and sort of like big land raiders. Obviously, the Vikings by sea and by land, but big name. But they started very humble origins, basically being pushed along from east to west, along with all these other migrations of tribes coming through the Cumans and other groups that basically had to keep migrating to survive the push from the west to the west. And so it starts from a very humble origin, and I plan to have sort of like a programmed learning where you start learning the basic rules, basically, getting pushed along, learning how to forage and hunt and resettle. And, even though there were nomads, a lot of these tribes had settlements that they could pick up.
That sounds like a postcard game to me if I've ever heard one.
No,
Just
on a bigger scope.
Settlement, a prequel kind of thing.
It started to go up to where you have, starting to deal with, technology and learning different things with people, trading and diplomacy and how to get along with different tribes. And like, well, do I fight or do I'm going to join the Khazar Khanate, and later I'm going to get kicked out of the Khazar Khanate and escape and fight the Bulgars. And of course there was the Volga Bulgars and the Balkan.
That sounds pretty ambitious.
It is. So it's like, it could be a trilogy of games, or it could be one big, huge game with all these subsets. So I don't know yet. I've got like 2 shelves over here of books. My bibliography is up to like 36 books. It doesn't count, articles or other games and stuff. It's just books. So I've got a, huge scope. So you were talking about playtesting before. I have not. I'm nowhere near even getting close to play. I could cobble together the little start where I basically clone Britannia, change it to a small subset of tribes in between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, and I could play that, but it wouldn't be anywhere near anything new that I would want to do. And in retrospect,
you bring up an interesting thought. You're building a fairly complex, sounds like far-reaching game that potentially might be a game system that has multiple games to tell the arcing story that you're wanting to tell.
Possibly, yeah.
And as a designer, it sounds like you're going to build this in sub-assemblies, for lack of a better term. And those individual sub-assemblies, and I'm half joking about a postcard game, but I know that Purple Druid used the postcard jam to test a subsystem of a larger game he was working on. And so just keep that in mind, that if you've got a mechanic that might fit into your larger world, that's a great, because you've got, not that I need to pitch it, but I will, you've got a combined set of rules. You have to make that work with a small, you have to focus on that. And that may help you building a larger game by focusing on some of the smaller sub-assemblies in this. And I keep using that term, but I think it's appropriate.
Maybe on the Christmas card game, since that's a little more. Yeah.
Well, no, because you can try things out, and if they don't work, it's nothing lost, right? It's something gained.
That's a bit of what we talked about last week as well. Just having the basic core mechanics of even like he said, a subsection of your rules that you really want to try out. Maybe even the mechanics of what you really want, on this game, even if they're stripped away to maybe 3 or 4 rules only with very few units, or whatever it is that, you use in your game, because that might give you some inspiration for your future game as well, and also get you talking about the topic you have, It will start giving you, a little, perhaps a little more focus on, what's going to be your future game. Big Brother.
You have to eat the cow one bite at a time.
So I wanted to share something about, you guys had asked like how much playtesting is enough. And the question is, you can play test forever potentially, and eventually you want to get your game out there, right? Yeah. And some people feel like, oh no, it has to be perfect. There can't be any errata. And thank God we're not. Oh, ID Jester, I love him, but he's a little crazy on this point. But if you're not, most of you I think are familiar with ID Jester, right? Maybe not. but definitely do some playtesting if you're actually releasing that into the wild. When I did my 2 play-by-mail games, I'd only play tested them with myself. So I went live with my friends to actually do this, and I charged the money. That took a lot of balls. And thank God
You monster.
that my friends put up with it. But I actually had like a monthly newsletter that was coming out.
Oh, wow.
And I would they could write stories. So in a sense, they could put out propaganda and plant rumors, but it also gave me a chance to
The metagame.
update the rules every month.
Yeah.
I could introduce a correction, or I could introduce rules clarifications or new rules subsystems, which I took advantage of on my first game, Fantasy Empire Builder.
Well, on that specific point, if you do Amazon's KDP and you publish a game, you could go in the next day and change your rules, and whoever buys it from that point forward will get the corrected or updated version of your game.
Well, that's the advantage of any electronic print and play publishing, where you can, without cost, update your files.
Yeah, print on demand
great.
totally works for that.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting.
That's my experience.
So we are at 2 hours. I'm going to try to keep these around 2 hours so that when people are wanting to listen to this post, they can, not wonder if this is going to ramble on. Again, I love doing it. So, but I am going to try to keep it to 2 hours. So with that in mind, I want to thank everybody that came on tonight. Mike, Erich, Rob. Now it was about 1:30 in the afternoon for him on a Friday. So he's already light years ahead of us in the future. So he kind of knows what's going on. Sorry, he had left me a message that I just saw. I'm still learning the interface here with this thing. So yeah, again, you get to see how the sausage is made on this podcast. But I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. And if you haven't, share this with a friend. Get into game design. I'm going to keep trying to get people like 2K to get him out of the.
Just go for it.
Exactly.
2K, go for it. Just do it.
Yeah, nothing bad will happen to you. We don't send people to your house and beat you up because we don't like your rules. Not yet. I don't have the money for that. When I do, then maybe. But anyway, everybody, thank you so much. And I will see you guys next week. Bye for now.
Until
Bye-bye.
then.